Hey everybody, Breakthrough Health and Life Coach Glenn Hattem here. I'm here with my good buddy Tom Terwilliger. Say hi to everybody, Tom.
Yo guys, good to see you all.
I'm just bursting out of my seams. I can't even put words together because I'm so excited to be here with one of my incredible mentors and coaches and good friends. And the conversation that I'm anticipating is going to go wild in all kinds of crazy directions. So I can't really steer our audience and saying here's how it's going to go down, because we decided we're going to free flow today and just see what happens. But Tom's someone that I've just respected for many years, not just because of his background and industry I'm just so passionate about, which is fitness, but also just who you are as a person that's inspired me in what's possible and has laid out in front of me the ingredients of what can be a great life and where to lean in and do my work, not just as man or as a fellow human being, but also, the creative entrepreneurial spirit and the warrior that's here to, I often see us as sheepdogs in this world, here to help, here to support, and that starts with ourselves, and then that then is carried out into the world, that message.
I love that. I love that concept that I never really thought about it before. And you say refer to us as sheepdogs, and in many respects, that's what coaches are. I mean, it really is about, hey, you know what? We know there's some cliffs over here. We know there's some pitfalls over here. We're here to guide. We're here to support. We're here to be that, again, the interpreter of the terrain that someone may or may not be facing in their lives, but want to face ultimately in moving forward with whatever direction they want to go. So I love that idea. I'd like to say I had a sheepdog's head of hair, but that's not the case. But I'll take the persona over the hair anyway. So I love it. That's awesome, man. I tell you what, I'm thrilled to be with you, man. It's we've known each other for several years now, and I'd love to share the story about how we ultimately met and created a bond along the way, and how we've worked together over the last year or so, on your journey. And because it's been inspiring for me, to be quite honest with you. And I think as a coach, and perhaps I certainly couldn't put myself into the mind of a sheepdog, but I think one of the most rewarding things for a sheepdog to be able to experience is, hey, we've gotten the sheep where they needed to go. They're safe, sound, and ready to be sheared. I don't know if you're ready to be sheared yet, but you've put yourself in those positions many times and have escaped it somehow. But for me, helping guide in any way, shape, or form and inspire someone as inspiring and motivating as you has been quite a reward for me. So that's awesome.
It's been fun, and it's still fun,
it
and gut wrenching. I'm sure you had to hold your breath with me on some of the
couple times.
Yeah, a couple times. Yeah, I'd love to maybe start before we kind of go into some of those juicy shares. Let's reel back in time to when you were just finding your path, and maybe that even starts in those early teens and the highly influenced 20s of yours, where the path was this snake, and
truly was.
I think it'd be and it's one of those things that let's laugh at your pain. Some of these enjoyable moments that you had, that while going through them, they were very transformative. And I just think you've lived a very unique life, treacherous at times, but I'd love for you to just invite us all in to some of those incredible stories and experiences that I often feel like there aren't really pivotal moments, but you actually have some really distinct pivotal moments that happened that were just really loud and really clear.
Really, there was one that was very loud.
Yeah, one was very loud. So,
but yeah, and I appreciate that. And I think what's interesting about the journey is I really truly believe, whether subtle or profound and dramatic, I think we all in life have those experiences. Whether we've identified them along the way or not, I think the times we do identify those pivotal moments and those ups and downs in our lives is when we reflect and we take those journeys of self-discovery in many respects. And I think, for me now in my early 60s, that's been the process, at least for the last 10 years or so. But prior to that, which is about escaping this or moving towards that, the last 10 years has really been about self-discovery and who I really am. And I know that sounds cliche to a degree, but when you've had a few different lifestyles, like I have, you ultimately end in a place where, or you come to a place where it's like, okay, so who am I? Who am I really? What has this experience been all about? But I really also believe, even from early on, most of us in life have these experiences, where we feel like we're less than, or we feel frustrated, or we're not the same as everyone else, or we feel discouraged, or we feel left out. Maybe we feel in some way, shape, or form over accomplished, and many young people as overachievers, a lot of young athletes that excel early on because of good genetics or great encouraging environments or so, wind up frustrated and discouraged because that may not continue later on. And so that can be a difficult challenge. For me, it was that the proverbial not feeling good enough. I mean, from the time I guess my twin brother and I were in third grade when we were diagnosed with dyslexia, hyperactivity, all the things so many kids experience today. And of course, there are more drugs that deal with these things. I'm not necessarily I don't necessarily recommend those things, but there's so many more kids that we've discovered are having these profound, disempowering experiences in their lives. And at the time, for me going through that, other than my twin brother, I felt like I was alone in it, completely alone. I thought I was the only kid on the planet. I didn't even know what dyslexia meant, other than I wrote my name M-O-T, and that's one of the ways they discovered it. It's like, why do you keep writing your name? I was just like, that's how it's spelled, I didn't know any better. And so once it was diagnosed and the result was being placed into the special ed class, the little yellow bus, you might say, right? With some really, truly challenged young people, kids that really, truly had difficulty and might have had some mental retardation or difficulties physically. And so that became sort of a stigma. And I thought I was alone in that. I thought I was the only kid on the planet that was dealing with this kind of thing. That's what we feel like. We feel isolated. So for me, it was feeling isolated. It was feeling left out. It was feeling less than, and ultimately being convinced that I was stupid, because it wasn't just me that was convincing myself. It was like the circumstances kept suggesting it. You're stupid, you're stupid, you're stupid. And that disempowering belief sort of like embedded itself into my unconscious mind, and it influenced everything that came after that, until, of course, I discovered it and decided to change it along the way. But one profound experience, just to kind of drive it home, was I remember I had in fourth grade, I had a very dear friend. Her name was Diane, and she was at the time a tall, redheaded girl, really sweet, really cute. And we used to spend a lot of time together on her porch at her mom and dad's house. And we would play the old 45s. Maybe there's probably very few of your viewers right now know what even a 45 was, but it's a little 45 disc. It's sort of like a record. And they had all the old songs of the 60s, mostly bubblegum music, and we would sit on that porch and we'd enjoy it and spend a lot of time together. And I remember the day after I'd been put into the special ed class, and it got out, to the rest of the school. And I remember walking up to her house, and she came running out, didn't even want me getting near the house. She says, "I'm not your friend anymore. I don't want to play with you anymore. You're a retard. You're a retard." And that, even now, it has a profound effect on my emotions. It's still embedded into the cells of my body. And so that became the belief system. And as a result, I rebelled. It was like, how we find ways, and this is true for everyone's experience, whatever it might be. The athlete who failed at one time but wasn't used to failing, didn't have the emotional intelligence to deal with it, or the child who always got straight A's and suddenly doesn't. We find ways to deal with it. We can get angry, we can get frustrated.
So have you seen my baseball becomes, have you seen my baseball bat?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. I mean, my baseball bat became, my calling card, you might say, So in the special ed class, my twin brother, who was also with me on the same exact road and experience, wow, we formed a little outlaw bicycle club, you might say, called the Savage Skulls. I mean, we even put patches on our backs like outlaw motorcyclists. And we had chopper, the twin chopper handlebars all chopped out, front ends all raked out and stuff like that. And the Savage Skulls were the bully killers, because in the special ed class, there's no shortage of bullies, not in the class, but outside the class. Everyone in the special class was bullied by someone or many. There was no shortage. So we never had a problem finding somebody to fight or someone to stick up for, to stand up for in our class. And so that became my reputation, and that became my model of the world. How do I get attention? How do I become different? How do I overcome being stupid? How do I deal with these issues I'm dealing with? And to become that person, the outlaw, you might say. And so that was the beginning of it all. And that sort of snowballed right into high school. And that led to my first Harley Davidson, which I got when I was a junior in high school. So you can imagine, here I am, I'm 16 or 17 years old. I'm riding around, showing up at high school on a Harley Davidson chopper. And I am full on. I mean, it's just like I'm wearing the leather cutoff vest, gauntlets. I mean, this is like, I want to be an outlaw, but I'm in high school, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
Riding my chopper motorcycle in high school, right? And
so remind me of the movie, My Bodyguard, whatever movie,
I remember My Bodyguard. That's right. And that was that kid, the kid who played the bodyguard. He became a big actor later on, of course, but he was misunderstood. He was rejected, but he was big and he was tough, and ultimately came to defend someone who was constantly being bullied. And that's kind of who I became. That was my persona in many respects. And but the Harley Davidson thing changed everything. It went from a Schwinn bicycle to a full-blown chopper, and and that didn't work out real well in high school. It just didn't. I mean, I was constantly getting into fights, and it didn't even have to be bullies anymore. It was just anybody I wanted to fight with. That's who I fought with. And I was very fortunate in some respects, because I had studied through my older brother Raymond, and ultimately in New York City was a Kung Fu Wushu Academy led by Grandmaster Alan Lee, who had escaped from communist China. And it's unfortunate that his influence in the area of Taoism didn't really affect me in terms of, a more passive approach to life. I decided to be more aggressive because of the other anger and the frustration and discouragement that was happening below the surface. So I took my Kung Fu practices, and I was pretty good by the time I was 15, 60 years old, after studying for 10 years. So there weren't too many bullies, regardless of size, that could stand up to 10 years of Kung Fu training at that time, And so that was also part of the persona. But it didn't work out well, because I got into a fight with a gym teacher, and I'm going into the circumstances, but ultimately that didn't fare well. And I decided to leave high school. I just said, that's it. I'm done. I took my chopper, rode off into Manhattan, and started looking for people to ride with, because I still have a saying today: there's only one thing that sounds better than a Harley chopper. There's many Harley choppers all at once. And I was influenced by that. And so I started riding with, I connected with some of I could say today, the wrong people, certainly the wrong crowd. And I went into the whole outlaw bike club scene with anything but eyes wide open. I anticipated a camaraderie, and it was a brotherhood, and it was, but it was so much more than that, not in a good way.
Right.
And so ultimately, I was in the club arena for I think it was about 5 years or so. And that was my lifestyle. The Harleys, drinking, drugs, alcohol, guns.
I mean, you're living the Sons of Anarchy lifestyle that it's shown on TV as glorified, but there's it was you left the gang, the outlaw gang, on the makeshift bikes. And
but I will say this, that show was pretty close to reality for the most part, and again, not to disparage some of my brothers of the wind, I still like to call them. And I still have some friends that are in the club. I have one that just left, my dearest friend at the time, and left the club just a year or so ago, after almost 30 years riding with this particular outlaw club. And he finally came to his senses and left the club as well. But it was very much like the Sons of Anarchy in that respect. And like you said, on the surface, it's glorified. They're doing things for the community, and touching people in some ways, and they're just riding, they're just a bunch of guys that love motorcycles, you know. But I think we know the reality of it, and that's what I vacillated with for at least 3 of those 5 years. It's just like, this isn't who I am, because on the juxtaposed side, the other side of the coin of this special ed, struggling, frustrated, angry young man, was this very religious upbringing that my parents instilled, which was all you know, Judeo-Christian values. And so I had all that, and I had that belief system still. And so when it began to reveal itself in terms of what the club life really was about, it didn't meld well. And I tried, because it was fun. I was partying, I was riding my motorcycles, we were doing rallies, there was women, it was all this stuff that like sort of created a smoke screen against what was happening inside, which was a tremendous conflict with that lifestyle. And so I vacillated with that. I'd like to, you know, even admit to myself that I didn't have the courage at that time to pull out. I'll fight any son of a gun.
Right.
You know, I'll go up against guys with guns. I didn't care at that time. If that's what we want to define as courage, which it isn't, I was the most courageous guy on the planet, but I didn't have the internal fortitude, the moral courage to say, this isn't for me. I'm out. Ultimately, that came to a head and it happened. But it took those 3 years to finally find that courage and find a message within that gave me the courage to be able to make that happen.
Yeah, you've also found yourself in these predicaments, you know, that you know, it's almost like you need a firecracker to like signal off something, and you maybe share a little bit about that piece of time, you know, maybe in like, you know, I know you've told the story a bunch, but maybe leading up to that moment, you know, as like, it's almost like blinders are on, you know, and then all of a sudden, you know, it's maybe a rumble in the distance as a hint of things, but maybe, yeah, share about this pivotal point, you know, for you.
Yeah. And again, going back to, I think everyone's experience, you know, the circumstances are always different for everyone, but everyone's experience, it's a human experience in many respects. And it is frustration, discouragement, overcoming that, discovering who we are, finding our moral fortitude, and being able to stay in line with our values. And at the time, that's what was happening. I was compromising my values on a daily basis. And much of that happens as a result of masking it. Right, as we know that, and this happens to so many people in our lives, is that we mask with drugs, with food, with alcohol, with sex, with whatever else it might be, that tends to temper our situation, our emotions, and so that's what was happening with me. And we were partying daily. I mean, there was alcohol constantly, drugs constantly, and so even when those moments of being alone and having to reflect and look in the mirror at myself, you know, it was short-lived. So it never really gave me the opportunity. I never gave myself the opportunity to say something's got to change. And of course, there were so many there's so many experiences then that were literally life-threatening. You don't ride with an outlaw bike club without your life in jeopardy. I mean, there was about 2 years, we had a conflict with a rival bike club, and several of my brothers were killed in that conflict, and I came close myself. And that's when I really began to reflect, and also like start to look at myself. I really take a look in the mirror. And one of those profound moments literally happened at the clubhouse, at the biker clubhouse. And it was, you know, the biker clubhouse wasn't as nice as Sons of Anarchy. I guess we just didn't have the budget. I don't know, but it was just it was like an old small warehouse, maybe 3,000 square feet or so, and there was an office in there, and we had a bar, but the bar was a makeshift. It was made out of plywood and 2x4s, whatever we could find. The guys built it and covered it with some leather, and there was an old mirror in the back, and it was cracked. You can imagine one of the old mirrors that just like you can hardly see your image in it anymore. It's kind of old and faded, and it had some drinks back there, and there was always a barmaid. One of the old ladies would be, and they're not old ladies, we just called them the old lady, right? And so the old ladies would be behind the bar and serving drinks all the time. And I remember distinctly this one particular time, and it's etched in my memory as if it was yesterday. But it was after vacillating, after looking in the mirror, hiding from who I was and what I was doing and the lifestyle that I had embraced. I glanced in the mirror at that place, and I didn't recognize myself. Here I am, I'm 23 years old, and I looked old. It was almost as if it was a reflection of something in the future. It was me 10, 15 years from now. And part of it was that it melded with what I was seeing around me, which was a lot of these guys weren't young, athletic, tough look. I mean, they were just like guys that looked like they'd been beat up, like ridden hard and put away wet several times. And I'm looking around like, this is it. And I glanced in the mirror and I saw that in me at that moment. And it was just like, man, I can't remember the exact words I was saying, but the exact words that I heard, I remember. I remember a voice seemingly coming out of nowhere that said, "You're done. Walk away." And I am like, literally, it was like somebody was whispering in my ear. I stopped. I looked around and there was no one. Sure, there was plenty of people, lots of gabbing, lots of stuff going on, but there was no one right there. And I heard it again the second time. And this time it was much more powerful. This time it meant it. It wasn't asking, it was telling. "You're done, walk away." And I had to listen. I had to listen. I didn't know what it was. In my conscience, it was God, perhaps. It was my guardian angel whispering in my ear. "Now is the time. This is your opportunity. You may not get this opportunity again." And I had to listen. And it was like, that was it. I literally pushed away from the bar. Someone even walked up and said, "Hey, have a beer with me. Hey, let me grab you a beer." And I'm like, "No, I'm done." I pushed away from the bar and I started to walk out. And it's about 20 feet to the door. And I get just about to the door, open the door, turn back and look back for just that moment, just sort of like, this is it. Anytime we move forward in something, we leave something behind as well. And this is one of the things we have to be able to have this power, find this power in our own lives as well. Because even if you don't know what you're moving towards, and I call it the leap of faith, right? In my coaching process, experience the leap. It's the leap. And sometimes we don't know. There's an abyss out there. There's a void. Sometimes we can make a decision about what we're leaping towards and know exactly what that is. But other times we just have to leave what is behind and what's been causing pain and frustration, and discouragement, what's been causing us to compromise our lives and our values. And for me, that's what it was. I didn't know what I was moving towards yet, but I opened that door and I looked back to see what I was leaving. And in that instant, the message was loud and clear. Behind the bar, this rickety old bar we called the Green Monster, it was all painted green.
Yeah.
There was a loaded double-barrel sawed-off shotgun behind the bar. And it's almost always cocked, both barrels, and ready to go, just in case. So someone must have shoved against the rickety old bar as it was, knocked that shotgun off its perch. It hit the ground, both barrels went off, literally in the exact spot that I had been standing just moments ago, and blew a massive hole. Both barrels, massive hole, wood chips, glass, you name it, shotgun shells throughout, just scattered through the entire place. It was like a beehive had just been opened. And of course, the place, erupted into chaos. Everybody's got guns out, people are freaking out, hiding behind tables. I'm standing, I'm frozen, standing at the door. I get the door open. And he's just like, I look around, and there was only one person injured, unfortunately. It was a woman that I knew very well. And someone came to her head very quickly, and as did I. And after that moment, I left. I walked out and never looked back. And for me, that was such a defining moment that literally changed my life forever, because there was never any doubt at that point. Sometimes we have doubts. Maybe I shouldn't have left my brothers. Maybe I shouldn't have made that decision. Things are a little frustrating, a little discouraging, a little tough right now. I should have just stayed where I was. Sometimes it's easier to stay where we are. Sometimes it's easier to stay in a disempowering relationship when we know we should leave.
Yeah.
And sometimes we leave and make a decision, but then wonder, was it the right decision? There's no wondering after something like that happens. It was the right decision. I wouldn't be alive today had I not heard that little inner voice, that whisper from God, and walked away at that moment. I wouldn't even be here today, much less talking with you. So that was the loud firecracker that made all the difference in the world. And there was several before that, but I just didn't listen. I didn't have the whisper for that. I wasn't receptive to that little inner voice or God speaking to me. And everything changed after that radically. Because it's you make a 180 after something like that. It's just like, okay, now what? And then you got to find a way to answer that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how, like, if you don't listen, the voice of God, it's a subtle, quiet voice. You have to be quiet to hear it. And somehow you must have been quiet at that time to hear it. And then the firecracker, was there to just reinforce, like, you're stepping all the way through this portal, like, into the unknown. And what were you leaving behind aside from the painful aspects? What were some of the things you were like, oh, I'm also leaving,
Brotherhood. I was leaving that thing that I went into it with this anticipation. It was a brotherhood, a camaraderie, a connection. At the time, keep in mind that I was a high school dropout, riding my Harley Davidson, feeling alone other than my twin brother, and feeling like less than. And the outlaw motorcycle clubs refer to themselves as 1%ers. And 1% of 1% of 1% of society. And I felt like that. I felt like an outcast. I already had my Savage Skull colors. I already had my Chopper Schwinn bicycle. I already felt like that outcast. And I felt like I had a connection there. So not only did I lose that or left that behind, but also I did have some truly, great brothers that had my back several times, that pulled my ass, excuse the expression, out of the fire. And so I had to leave that behind. It doesn't necessarily mean I had to disconnect from them completely, but once you disassociate from a club like that, you're not necessarily welcome back. You're not necessarily, there's no open arms. In fact, I had that experience one time when I drove by, this was about 5 years later, and I'd already been pursuing the Mr. America title, and I was very close to winning it. And I remember driving down the main street where we used to hang out, this old bar called Joey D's Pub. And I remember driving by, and it was about 20, 30 bikes a day. I recognized almost every one of them. And I recognized my twin brother's bike. And so I'm like, I'm going to go in. I haven't seen these guys. I'm under this grand illusion. I'm going to be welcomed in. It's like, hey, you been, man. So glad to see you're successful and doing good. Anything but. It was literally like completely rejected. And, but I started looking for my brother, and that's another story in itself. But so it was very painful for me at that time too, having pulled out and created a new lifestyle that was moving towards something that could be considered successful, to see my brother, my twin brother, who was on the same path. We were on exactly the same path all those years, to see him still so fully immersed in the lifestyle, because I knew it could only go in a couple of places. You're going to wind up in jail. You're going to wind up dead. And I remember that moment when I was looking for him. And so I'm just standing back across from the pool table. On the other side of the pool table is the men's rooms, 10 feet away, 15 feet away. And everybody's saying, yeah, your brother's here, but he's wasted, man. He's wasted. He's always wasted, But he was tough son of he could handle his booze. But he always carried this 12-inch Bowie knife. It might have been 14 inches on the strap to his leg. And I'll never forget, I'm looking around. I don't know where he is. I can't find him at this point. And all of a sudden I hear this like big thump, boom, 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 boom. And I look, and the Bowie knife is sticking out of the wall about 3 inches from my head. I glance across the room on the other side of the pool table, and there's my brother. And he had just wham, thrown it across the room. And boom, like right here. And man, that was a shocker to see him still that involved and still doing these crazy things that we used to do. It was that was a very painful moment for me to see that, Fortunately, long story short, when I opened up my first business, my first athletic club in Long Island, I asked him to come in as a partner. I said, but you have to leave the lifestyle behind. You got to change it all. And he did. He saw the opportunity and said, you know what? I want out too. And this is a great opportunity. And he did. And he straightened himself up, won 2 big bodybuilding competitions. He was a great business partner. And, it's just been some great women in my life, but I have to call my brother the love of my life. He's my twin brother, man. I love him. And it was so.
I'm surprised you haven't got tattoos all over you from having this incredible.
I know. He's completely inked up. And that's what he does now. He's very successful. He did airbrush for years as one of the top painters in the world for motorcycles. Stayed in that. Still loved bikes. So do I. But then he got into tattoo artists, and he's just one of the best. He's fantastic. Threatening to cover me at 63. I'm like, yeah, I don't know, maybe.
Well, I just love the split here between just seeing the, in the bar, you see where this path is taking you, this weathered and beaten down, this is the path. And yet here you are going like, I'm going to start, like everything clean, everything like pure lifestyle. And I've got to be this, representative on stage. I'm going to be this representative in your, when you develop, your TV show and your facilities in the East Coast. Yeah, maybe tell a little bit about that part of the journey as well, because there's like this, still there's this protective thing going on, because it's like, most of us, we don't eliminate our insecurities, we carry them with us in different
That's right. That's absolutely right.
We have to come, I often like quote Ram Dass, but he just talks about how, like, at first, these things, they buckle you in the bathtub. Eventually you're like, hey, come in for tea and teach me something, because we each have, in this world as a means of beautiful creations, but also we're tortured, by haunted by don't quite go away completely.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%, no question about it. But you also mentioned something that I love, and it's just like those things, those insecurities, those doubts, those fears that we all have. It's human nature, right? And I call them the dragons. And the dragon can recede, we can push it away, we can distract it, we can force it back into its lair for a while, but it's always there. And the first sign of being frail or vulnerable, it will reappear. But one of the things I love that you just said, and I think it relates to this, is that they can teach us things. They can teach us something about ourselves. They can help us identify things we couldn't otherwise. Those fears, those insecurities, those experiences that we had, if we don't continue to identify them or connect the negative or disempowering emotion to whatever we coded as trauma, and are able to see it for what it is. It was an experience, and these experiences teach us something, right? Yep. They make us curious, they teach us lessons, and they allow us to move forward through
they catapult us forward. They leverage us.
It does, absolutely.
Without those demons, what will we create? What would we do?
Yeah, and I think too is just like, and that's what as coaches we've come to understand, and that's what we help others understand as well, is that those things that we tend to hide from, run from, or deny, in our lives, our experiences and our traumas, they can be powerful lessons that can move us forward, literally. And I will say this, that those things you mentioned, and I'll talk some things about the other side of leaving, the other side of the shotgun blast, let's call it, that a lot of it was moving away from pain, moving away from that experience, moving away from that. And the pain, by the way, doesn't have to be a physical trauma. It can obviously be an emotional trauma. And it's painful to think of yourself as less than. It's painful to think of yourself as a stupid or ugly or fat or whatever it might be that is your disempowering thought and emotions attached to that. It's painful because we want more. We want to be able to do more, but it's those things, those beliefs, those thoughts, those doubts, those uncertainties, those fears that hold us back from doing it. And that's painful. So for me, I was moving away from that pain that kept me hidden for so long, for 5 years, that just kept me locked in a place where it was safe. And it's like, I'm with people that relate to that. I'm with people that understand that. I'm with people that don't judge that, and instead use it to move forward. And so that's, I love that you phrased it that way. And I think that's so important to understand for all of us. We can do that, but sometimes it takes coaching. I don't think I could have done it alone. It took some mentoring, it took some coaching to be able to make that process truly work. Because we can make a decision, as you know, you can make a decision to climb Devil's Tower. But to do it on your own without coaching,
stupid,
without some mindset training, without some training along the way, I mean, just like brother, you wouldn't be here today. It's very unlikely you'd be here today either.
I was a lot of different coaches, including yourself, that there were specific things I needed. And when I came up with the idea, none of those things, none of the how-to was there. It was just like, hey, I'm going to do this thing. And like you just said, it's like something's calling me out here. I'm leaving behind a familiar version of me and circumstances, and I'm going to trod down this unique path, or maybe there isn't a path. I'm going to make a path.
That's right. It may not be.
Yeah, and as you maybe share, example, just you excelled with bodybuilding in the fitness world. You were I often talk about how, when I climbed Devil's Tower, for a moment I got to be a rock god. And you were in the fitness arena, on the Olympia stage and everything. Like you were a god in this certain sense, of someone who had a lot of things dialed right. Yet you still worked with coaches. You still
always
sought out experts, and like you had to have your Costamato, in your ear that's saying you're the greatest.
Yeah. I had very few coaches that ever said I was the greatest. They always said you have the potential to be the greatest.
Potential.
You're screwing up. You're dropping the ball, and then it was like,
you
okay,
listen, and you listen. Yeah,
yep.
You have to listen, because like you got them on board with you, and you were on board with them, and yeah. What were some of the, I guess, the magical qualities of those powerful coaching relationships that helped you strive for greatness, to leave behind your weaknesses, and leave behind being average and wanting to go for extraordinary and risk it all, risk rejection again?
Right. Well, I think if I'm honest, in an unofficial way, even in an official way, my first coach was really was my older brother Raymond. My older brother Raymond was a police officer in New York City during the worst times to be a police officer in New York City. In fact, it was worst time to be anyone in New York City, except maybe a real estate investor. During the 70s and early 80s, he was my kung fu coach, and more than that, he was a mentor. And he was one of the reasons I had to get out of the Outlaw Bike Club was because it says like I was dishonoring him and I was disappointing him in many respects. Of course, we don't necessarily, find ultimate power in moving forward based on disappointing anyone except ourselves. But it was part of it. It was when you stack motivations, that can be part of it as well. So my first real coach was my brother Raymond. And I have to honor that because he was a fantastic kung fu coach, taught us all the philosophies around that as well. Even beat my brother and I up a couple of times when we had it coming. There's no question about it. So he was really tough, but he was also understanding and fun. We did a lot of camping. We did a kung fu survival test one time in the Adirondacks when we were younger. Was probably 11 years old or so. And we went up to the Adirondack Mountains in upstate New York, and we did a 7-day survival test where we went up there with no food, very little provisions, and we had to survive. We had to do what we had to do. And it was tough. It was extremely difficult, especially, for a couple of whiny 11-year-old kids, we managed to break through some doubts and uncertainties there and some limitations.
So you guys were just hungry at that young age to create a crucible and to like test your mettle.
It was extremely challenging, and he didn't provide any quarter, you might say. My favorite experience through that whole thing though was the last day when we finally made it back to his Jeep, and we were driving through town, and we stopped at a candy store, and we just like devoured everything, cupcakes, cookies. You could imagine. I mean, we hadn't eaten hardly anything but grubs and some fish we caught here and there. I mean, that was all we were able to eat. And
it sounds like what people do when they do their diet and then they binge. They do
it was a total binge,
detox, retox.
Yeah, a total binge. And to see my brother my older brother too, who was our mentor, our sensei, our Sifu. To see
I got to experience that when I was in Southeast Asia, where I did a cleanse, and we weren't eating anything other than like your coconut waters and everything, and all these folks from the UK would come in, and they'd be drinking and smoking, and then start the cleanse the next morning. And then as soon as they finish the cleanse, instead of like appropriately getting off the cleanse after a week, they would be like smoking, drinking.
See, that's one of the worst things. Your receptors are just wide open to all those toxins again. And we did. And so for us, it wasn't about cleansing, it was about cleansing our spirit. It was about finding ourselves. It was about strengthening our will in that respect. So he was my first coach, and he wasn't easy, although understanding and loving. But after I left the biker community, after the post shotgun experience, one of the things I had to say to myself, where do I go? What do I do? How do I start back on this road? And certainly at that point was, this idea that my body had been beaten and been stabbed, and alcohol and drugs and all these things that I needed to come back from. And the first place to do that was to get in the gym. So I joined a gym called Future Man, and I had been there and trained there a little bit early on as a teenager, but this was stepping back into it after this lifestyle and looking like and feeling like crap. And these guys were serious. Future Man was the most serious bodybuilding gym in Long Island. It was in Amityville, and I ran into the guy who owned the place again, Tony Pandolfo, and Tony was so gracious, and it was a champion bodybuilder. The guy was a great bodybuilder himself, but so gracious and so generous with his time. He became my next mentor and coach, and encouraged me to think about doing a competition. I said, I want to get in the best shape I can as fast as I can. And he said, well, you have to commit to something. You have to find a goal, and I remember it was interesting because one of the things that really turned me on to coaching was his line of questioning. He literally peeled the onion, and we talk about this, peeling the onion, getting to the real why behind our goal or motivation. Because I said, I want to be a bodybuilder. He said, well, you got to train for a contest. We got to pick a contest and train for it. And I said, well, I just want to be a bodybuilder. He goes, well, okay, why? And I said, because I want to be big. I want to be big and strong. Doesn't everybody want to be big and strong? He goes, not everybody. He goes, so why do you want to be big and strong? And he kept peeling the onion and peeling the onion and peeling the onion until literally I was in tears. I had tears running down my face from that line of questioning, because it ultimately got me to what I really truly needed and why I thought this would provide that outcome. And I don't need to go into the details now, but it had a lot to do with
that. What was that? What was it that just finally fucking hit?
It was really truly and again, we can all find different ways to experience this or create validation for ourselves. Right. And to be validated by others, or be validated by yourself, to ultimately come to terms with, hey, this is who I am. I'm capable of more. It could be around money. It could be around relationships. It could be around your body. It could be around going back, get your education, advanced intellect, whatever it might be that allows us to feel this sense, at least at the time. And again, keep in mind, this isn't the top turquoise level of the spiral dynamics. This is down at the lower levels that we're still struggling in Maslow's basement to rise up and find something, and no understanding later on, as we do ultimately with more enlightenment, is that we don't need that level of validation. But at the time I did. And at the time it was very powerful, because I still had these beliefs that I was not smart, and I was dumb, and I was still this retarded kid in the special ed class, and still this dirtbag outlaw biker. And here I was trying to pull myself up by the bootstraps. And so this line of questioning ultimately got deep enough that it was about validation. And having read bodybuilding magazines, my older brother Raymond being a kung fu master and a bodybuilder himself, and having a great physique, that was my vehicle to find that validation. Could I do this? This is my vehicle. This is the direction I want to take. Somebody else could do something. Hey, you know what? I want to make a fortune. You know what? I want to have the most powerful, generous relationship possible. Like I said, you can find it in different ways. For me, this was the vehicle. And so when he dug deep and peeled that onion and got to the real why, it was like, that was powerful for me. And it was, and literally once we did, and he understood it. And this guy wasn't a trained coach. He was just a good mentor and a good coach in his own right. He said, all right, we've got some work to do. So be in the gym tomorrow at 6 a.m. That was it. Be in the gym tomorrow at 6 a.m. And the training began from there. And he was tough. I've never trained so hard. I've had some great training partners in my day. I've had to. In fact, I have a little something that I posted on Facebook, not Meta now we're calling it, right? A couple of years ago, so my wife and I training, just a picture we were doing a photo shoot for Iron Man magazine, and I was well in my 50s, and there's a picture of her and me, and I'm doing curls and she's pushing me. And I said, you want to succeed? Invite somebody in that will beat the crap out of you, and invite them into your life. because you got to have people that will push you. You got to have people that will challenge you. So I've had some really challenging, in fact, people I didn't want to train with, who I found to be the best training partners. The people I was afraid, I was scared to death to train. I can't keep up with these guys. I can't keep up with this guy. Look how strong he is. That's the guy I had to train with. And so Tony Pandolfo became that first mentor, that first real guy that pushed me. Now, he didn't train with me, but he would supervise. He would watch. He was always there in the gym. It was a little gym. Yeah. I mean, like, you had 5 more reps. Why'd you quit? Why'd you stop? You could have put another 50 pounds on there. Why'd you stop? Why didn't you put more weight on there? You know, I saw you leave early yesterday. You left in an hour and a half. Why didn't you stay the extra half hour? Always challenging me.
Always watching.
Yep. And so that was powerful. And again, that's part of the coaching process as well. Accountability. You said you want to be a bodybuilder. You expressed the concept of being a champion. Now you know the path to get there. Now do it. Do what you say you're going to do. And that was the first time I ever really experienced that. And it was extraordinarily powerful. And that in itself got me to the level where I could start training and considering my first competition, which was the New York Metropolitan Championship, which at the time was an extremely sought after title. Some of the top bodybuilders in the country had won that competition title. Chris Dickerson, Dennis Tenorino, several others that went on to win Mr. America, Mr. Universe, won that title. I was like their stepping stone. So that was the first contest. And I'm like, okay, I got my work cut out for me, man. And I decided to do this 2 years. I gave myself 2 years. And sure enough, I went in and I won. And it was an incredible experience, because that was the catapult. That was the thing that stepped me up to the next level, got me to the national championship, the Mr. America, which took me 3 years to win. Like you, Glenn, you know, the first time you tried to conquer Devil's Tower, and I know you've had so many other experiences, but I personally find the Devil's Tower experience that you went through incredibly inspiring. So when I think about it, and to be honest with you, you and I talked after your first attempt. Yeah. And it was like, okay, just attempting it is incredibly powerful, incredibly an empowering experience to know I set this goal, I went for it, I did everything I could and fell short.
Yeah, I didn't see things coming sideways. I didn't see what could possibly happen. And then all of a sudden the word project came about. Yeah. It's like, you have a project now. Oh, either a project to quit on or a project to get busy.
That's right. That's right. Yep. And I think, you know, most people wouldn't attempt it, number one. But then there's another small percentage of people that might attempt it. And once they didn't succeed, and I would never use the word fail, but once they didn't succeed, good enough. They tried, you know, and I'm not doing it again. That's enough. I've tried it. That's enough. But to go back and then to be successful, that's powerful. And the reason why I was so inspired by that, because that was my experience as well. I had to. After the first national championship, I was third. And although encouraging, you know, it was also frustrating. It was like, and these guys were good. I mean, I remember being backstage, and if you've never been to a bodybuilding competition or ever been in one, you know, backstage is kind of like a chaotic scene. Everybody's pumping up and putting oil on and preparing. So my first national championship was in New Orleans, and I had over dehydrated to try and get tight, to tighten up the skin, you know, and get all the water out of the skin. And so I was in the audience watching the lighter weight classes compete. And all of a sudden I began to realize, oh, I can't even open my hand. It's like, oh my God, I'm cramping everywhere. It's like every muscle in my body's starting to cramp up. My legs are cramping up. And they finally called the light heavyweights backstage. And I stand up and my leg cramps. And then I bend it and the hamstring cramp. And then the other leg cramps. I go tumbling down 5 flights of stairs.
No way.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I couldn't even stand. Both legs completely cramped up. And I just went rolling down the stairs. So a bunch of guys came over, picked me up, carried me backstage.
A bunch of guys, because you're that big now.
Oh, it was like a bunch of guys, like a whole bunch of guys, right? And they're trying to massage it out, and they're like, oh, I don't know what to do, man. It just won't, you know, just locked up. So I grabbed one guy by the collar and I'm like, run out to the audience and run out to the stands and get me a hot dog and a beer. Sure enough, he came back with the hot dog, the beer. I pounded. It was enough sodium and enough fluid to get my muscles functioning again. got on stage, barely made it through what's called the prejudging, which is the earlier preliminaries, and came in third. So although it was frustrating, discouraging, I learned so much, just like you did. I mean, your first double towers, like you said, I mean, you did.
I mean, I didn't fall down 5 flights of stairs.
You fell though, didn't you?
But I did remember distinctly going like, this is the most boring piece of highway for 6 hours of driving to get to Devil's Tower, which is gorgeous. That, you know,
Wow.
but the drive there, I'm like, I am never driving this road ever again. And to find myself back on that road again, you know, I went from the first time I went, I was in a Prius, you know, sleeping in my buddy's car you know, me 6'1", sleeping in a Prius, which
Right.
you know, now I got a 4Runner and I'm driving back and I'm staying in a fancy lodge now. But I still was like, I said I'd never drive back down this road again.
That is so interesting that out of the entire experience, it was the drive out there that was the most discouraging. Oh my God. I don't think I've ever heard anything funnier in my life. It's like Devil's Tower. Guys, if you haven't, you know what Devil's Tower. I mean, it's nuts, man. And the drive out there. Well, you know what? You know what they say? It's not the destination, it's the journey.
It's true.
That can stop you.
Yeah, definitely. There was a couple moments where I was on the rock, you know, and going, oh my gosh, I'm back here again. I know I'm familiar with it now, but what I was familiar with before was that it was terrifying.
Right. That's what you remember.
Oh, did you forget? You
Yeah.
know, it's probably like, you know, a woman coming back for another round of pregnancy and like, did you forget?
I know, and that does happen. I think, you know, God bless women who are willing to go through it more times than once. My mom was one of them. 6 children.
Jeez.
Yeah, the last 2 children she had was me and my twin brother, 46 years old, twins, after having 4 kids already. So I kind of get where my tenacity comes from in many respects, and my not willingness to quit. So that's part of it. But yeah, so I admire that, and my experience was something similar because I took third that year, learned a lot, and it would have been a tremendous loss not to take that experience, the lessons from that, and go back and give this another try. But it was more than just giving it a try. It was like I was determined to win the national championship. I didn't care how many times it took, right? So the second time was I took second. So was I on this trajectory, and it was tough. It was grueling. It was a tremendous training process, and I got there. Some of the best bodybuilders, you know, on the amateur level were there competing against me, and I was very fortunate to take second. And then so back to the drawing board again. You know, what can I improve? How can I improve?
And I'm kind of like that, like you. I don't, you know, I often don't get things on the first hit. I think when I driver's license, I think I had to take that twice. I think my NSCA certification, I think with even like that was a second time. I think gosh, you know, I even recently with the hyperbaric chamber, I had to go back a second time.
Oh yeah, you told me about that. Like,
you know, to get in that bag and zip up. And then same thing with Devil's Tower. It's like you know, you practice, you train, and you learn from these experiences, you know. And I learned that the first time I needed to do it with the coach was like, I'll get you down safe. You know, that's a priority. You know, the second time I was like, if he dies, he dies. You know, it was like Drago out of Rocky IV. You know, like, I'm like, get me to the top. You know, I need the guy that's going to give me the top and is willing to risk me not making it to the top.
Right, absolutely. But that you had to find the right. That's the other thing too. Obviously, the lessons here are profound. It's finding the right coach as well. We can have coaches, we can have mentors. They're not always, or they're the right one for the moment. But maybe there's another level. There's something else. Or a different approach or a different system that works. You needed to have that coach, that guide, you might say, that was going to get you to the top at all costs. And you were willing to make some sacrifices along the way. And maybe perhaps, I mean, listen, this is no joking experience. I mean, perhaps the ultimate sacrifice. And, you know, I mean, I've been asked several times, I can't even tell you how many times, why would you, you know, push your body to such a level in the gym and dehydrate and do all these things necessary to win a high level bodybuilding competition? You know, and the only answer you can give is, why would someone climb Mount Everest? Why would someone climb Devil's Tower? Why would someone take a NASCAR around a hairpin turn, you know, at 230 miles an hour? It's because it's there, because it's a challenge. It's a way of validating ourselves and saying, I'm here, I will be seen, and I'll make it happen. Especially if you promise yourself you're going to make it happen. So for me, it was a commitment to those coaches along the way, including Tony Pandolfo and Bob Gruskin, and some of the worst people I know that was some of the best training partners I've ever had. You know, so one of my training partners was a complete, so I come from this biker background.
Yeah.
Right. So I've met some crazy people, but the closest thing to an actual sociopath that hated people and hated me was one of the best training partners I've ever had. The guy literally wanted to kill me, wanted to see me dead in the gym. And what doesn't kill us does what? Makes us stronger.
Yeah.
And ultimately he was part of the process of winning that national championship. And
well, I think that's what's wrong with our society, and the conditioning that comes through. You know, if you're going through a hard time in life, you know, the doctors tell you to take some meds. Let's take out the whatever fire. The pain is here to fire you in the next direction.
Well, I agree with you. I think that's part of the issue right now. We're not giving ourselves the opportunity to develop. Young people particularly are not giving themselves the opportunity to develop that emotional IQ. I mean, that EQ, that emotional intelligence, and the ability to be able to deal with frustrating and discouraging. When I lost that first nationals,
is what's helped grow you. It's helped.
Oh yeah.
I mean, like it's part of the equation. You can't take that piece of the equation out. You're gonna flat.
And I think, yeah, and that's part of the challenge for anyone and everyone who says, hey, because you may be sitting back listening to this right now, and if you are, I'm talking to you. You want more. You know you have more in you. We all at some point come to terms with ourselves and say, I've got more. I can do more. I can be more. I can achieve more, even if it's something small, but it's a challenge in some way, shape, or form. There's always the possibility that you will not succeed. There's always the possibility of experiencing pain. I gave it my best and I still couldn't do it. Some people would use the word fail. And we have to be willing to risk that. If we're going to take a chance, if we're going to manifest our magnificence in life, we have to be willing to embrace the possibility of it not coming out the way we want it, of not succeeding. That first national championship, even though, you know, it's like, hey, I'm going to the nationals, the biggest amateur show in the world. It's just like, for bodybuilding, it was like, it still was painful. And the second time, once you take third, now it's not just about going in and wanting to place and see how you do. Now you want to win. Right. Second time, now you want to make it to the summit, right? And that's everything is about making it to the summit at that point by the second time. And so when I didn't win and took second, and it was so close, by the way, it was 1 point that separated me from the guy who won, Phil Williams, who's a dear friend of mine today, just a wonderful human being. Very painful. It was very painful for about 24 hours. Then it fueled the fire. But it was, I had to accept that. I had to face my friends in the audience. I had to face my fans. It was just like, I failed. And it was extremely painful and difficult to face and frustrating.
I don't know if I talked to you about this, but you know, I wrote about this in my upcoming book here. The piece around, you know, when I was on the rock the second time, and you know, my guides, you know, he lays the gear and he takes off. He's around the corner.
He's up there, man.
He's on the phone with his girlfriend or whatever. You know, I'm here clinging on for dear life, and I'm like, I can't figure out how to solve this patch. And there's these 3 options that I've got, which is go up, stay where I'm at, or go back down. I'm not fucking going back down. And I'm going, and I can't stay where I'm at, because the longer I stay here, you know, it's like standing on the edge of a cliff doing cliff jumping with your friends, and like the longer you stay there, the more stuck you get. And also your muscles are frying out and getting exhausted.
Oh, yeah.
You're gonna get into a worse situation. And so the issue I was having, because I'd done all this training on like falling prior to the second round, so that I was not afraid to reach out and take risky moves with the potential of falling. You know, I didn't like it. I didn't like falling 10, 20 feet,
Plus, you lose ground. Not only is it painful, but you lose ground. It's
you lose
like,
ground, you gotta, and like all that hard stuff I got there, I gotta climb back through that again. But what the issue was that was terrifying me or overwhelming me, that I had to keep getting popped out of my head was, what if I can't do this? What if I can't succeed? What if I can't summit today, not make it to the top? I want to win at this. You know, my coach, my guide would occasionally, you know, I check in for validation, like, we're going to make it, right? And, you know, the rest of the time was me, you know, stewing in it and popping out of it to, I can't figure out how to do this. And then yelling at him, like, how do I do this? And, you know, he's just like, just do it. You know, and I mean, like,
but how?
Because he's, you know, he was like a $110, I'm 220, and he told me to grab the thing in front of me. I'm like, it's at my waist, you know, it's not here, you know, it's here. And so I had to climb following my body's intuition. And there'd be moments where I'm like, I can't figure out what to strategically do here. And then I just get so frustrated. I'm like, I got no choice. Like, I'm not going down. And I can't stay where I'm at. I'm like, oh, fuck it. And then I would just go and scurry up. And he's like, that's how you do it. And it was over and over.
Just did it.
I don't know how to do this. I can't. I tried this way. I tried that way. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And you're like, just do it. And then, you know, there'd be this, you know, quiet, you know, and then he'd hear this conversation going on, because it'd have to leave my head and be outside of me. And so I was having a conversation with myself going like, come on, buddy, I got you. Let's do this. And he's like, who the hell are you talking to down there?
Well, I can tell you one thing. I'm not talking to my girlfriend.
No, exactly.
Like you are.
Yeah. Wow. And you know, as much as that's frustrating, because I'm like, hey, I need your eyeballs and your ears and everything here. It's like, he knows, and he's relaxed, and he's like, we're good. We're going to make it. We're going to be fine. Stop stressing.
In many respects, I'm wondering on an unconscious level, his being relaxed, being on the phone with his girlfriend here and there.
Yes.
It says, okay, he's confident. He's not panicked. He's not watching my every move.
Yeah.
He just like maybe unconsciously sent a message. We've got this.
And I can relax into that.
Yeah.
So I needed that coach, that resourcefulness that's outside of myself, that's saying, hey, just make your next moves. Don't worry about. And even every time I would try to like watch, you know, he'd go through a whole pitch, and then I'd be like, okay, then he went there, and then he went there, and then as soon as I got onto it, it was like, okay, I can only deal with the next 3 moves here. Like, I don't even remember what's going on over there. I forgot everything, and it's just like, okay, I'm the one problem solving here. I'm the one working through all this. I'm the one having to be creative. I'm having to trust myself. I'm having to coach myself. I'm talking to myself. I'm doing all the encouragement. And then there are those moments where it's like, I'm at the upper, like the end point. And that's when, like, just knowing that, you know, I got Jimmy the Cricket over here, who's speaking truth, you know, and when I'm completely tapped out, it's like, I'm going to lean on that.
I think you bring up a great point. I think this is so, you know, pertinent to talk about, because we've talked about the power of coaching and what it can do to help move us forward with accountability, with understanding the terrain a little bit better. But at the same time, a great coach, the best coach possible, is yourself. You have to be able to coach yourself, and you have to be able to trust the process. And this is where practice, rehearsal, work comes in. We can't just dive into different things. You can't dive into a bodybuilding competition, climbing a tower, whatever it might be, dancing. You can't just dive in and expect to understand it. You have to develop a trust with yourself, understand the moves. But at some point, you're going to forget those as well. You're going to forget like everything you learned on a conscious level. And then you'll have to be able to trust the process and trust that you practice. You know, as the special forces guys would say, it's trust your training. Go back to your training. Whether you remember it consciously or not, it will come back. If you've built it into the muscle and into the cells, it will come back. So, and sometimes the best coach is the one in your own head, providing you know how to coach yourself. And come on, buddy, you've got this. Come on, you can do this. We've done this before. We've been here before. We can do this. This isn't insurmountable. And you got to keep yourself motivated in that respect. And the second best coach.
Yeah, and all that. I was saying all those things out loud. And then everyone, who are you talking to down there? I'm like, oh, I think there's somebody else on on the other side of the column here.
It's so funny because, you know, when you're training too, just like for a bodybuilding competition, for example, and the squat is probably one of the best examples of this. You know, you've got to put on muscle. For me, in my little 5'8" frame, natural weight is probably about 165 pounds. I'm about 175 now. To get up to 210, 215, you got to put on a lot of muscle, and you got to get under some weight to do that. So getting under a 500-pound bar, squat bar on a rack, there's a lot of self-talk going on, man, a lot. And you have to learn to ignore the negative self-talk and amplify the positive self-talk along the way. And that's one of the things that's important about self-coaching, right? Because we know that there's a little inner voice. There's always a little inner voice. And that little inner voice can come back, haunt you from the past. It's the dragon coming out of its lair. You can't do this. That's not who you are. You'll never be that good. You can't lift that heavy weight. You can't make it up to the top of this tower. Remember, you tried before and you failed. You're going to fail again, right? That little inner voice, we have to learn to be able to ignore that in many respects, and then amplify the one that has the encouraging words, that has the truth, you might say, about our own magnificence and what we're really capable of. And I'm a big believer that that's where meditation comes into play. We're able to silence those voices. You can't, if you try to do it without practice, without rehearsal, without meditation, without self-hypnosis in many respects, visualization is also a great process. If you try to do it at the moment, the negative inner voice is so powerful, it will win. You have to know how to suppress that, ignore it, allow it to just come in. It's going to come in, and just let it leave like a wave, followed by the positive self-empowering talk. And that's a meditation will help you do that. And so will visualization, big time.
And so will hanging on a rock. Like that first time, I think I told you, throughout that day, it was like I fell immediately on like the first pitch, and
that had to increase your confidence.
And then slammed my knee into the rock, you know, and then the voice, you know, that I was in my head for a moment where it was like, what the fuck are you doing up here? Why do you keep putting yourself in these situations? And then it was like, you know, the voice of the guide above is like, how you doing down there? I'm good. I'm not. And I've got to like, I'm like, all right, you know, it's a quick conversation with myself. Like, I'm going to deal with you later when we get back to the car. Right now, I got to keep moving up into this scary thing.
That's right. That's right. You have to prove that you're good. I am good.
Yeah. And throughout the day, and even throughout, you know, both climbs, I had to like quickly pop out of the head and be present and be expansive in my view of possibilities versus that limiting, closing up, closing down, shutting down. And that's a
big one, by the way. That what you just said is, I think, is you know, fairly common with a lot of people. It's just like, why do I keep whatever?
Yeah.
Why do I keep this behavior? Why do I keep attracting the same men? Why do I keep attracting the same women? Why do I keep drinking? Why do I keep going to the porn sites online? Why do I keep? Why? And that, you know, and again, that is not a good question. It's not an empowering question, because when you ask yourself those kind of why questions, guess what the answer is usually going to be? Because you're an idiot, because you're addiction, you're a jerk, whatever it might be. For me, when I asked myself that question, the answer was always because you're stupid, because that was the default. That's who the unconscious mind on a deep ego level believes. So that's the only answer I can come up with. Ask a more empowering question. It's like, I'm here for a reason. Why? I'm going to make this climb. How? I'm going to get under that bar and I'm going to squat for 10 repetitions. How am I going to do that? And then you find an answer that's more validating and more empowering. You know, as Tony Robbins would say, there are no wrong answers, just wrong questions.
Yeah.
When we learn to do those things, and that's it. And the wrong questions will pop into our head. We just can't answer them. If you answer them, you validate the question, and you start to retreat back into that old default. We have to break that default, break that neural pathway. And so for me, getting onto the bar, the training for most bodybuilders is not, the competition is tough. It's always grueling because you've dieted hard, you have very little energy. You're definitely on the verge of dehydration and exhaustion. You're probably in the least healthiest state of your life when you're on stage at a bodybuilding competition. And yet you're up against fierce competition. And the posing, the holding, the flexing takes a tremendous amount of effort, because you're not just once in a while hitting a pose. You're constantly under the microscope, and you have to always look prepared. You have to always look flexed to a degree, right? So the real work, however, is done in the gym. The real work for you was getting on that wall at where you live, where you have that rock wall. For me, it was getting under that 500-pound bar and being able to train myself to eliminate that negative voice. The voice was always there. I knew the reality. The reality was 500 pounds could crush my spine into sawdust, but I'm not going to let it. The muscles are going to hold that spine together. I'm going to keep my core tight. I'm going to hold my shoulders back. I'm going to strengthen my legs as I go down. I'm going to be cautious, but I'm going to hold my spine together. I'm not going to.
Importantly, I'm going to keep my mind tight.
That's right. But the reality is it can crush you. Those weights can crush you. So we have to learn. And that's one of the trainings that helps support people, for me anyway, in moving forward in other areas of my life. And by the way, you reminded me, I often forget about the TV show. It's like a chapter of my life I've almost completely forgotten about. 16 years. I did a show for Fox Sports Net. But it's literally, I would not, had you not mentioned it earlier, I never bring it up. I never talk about it. I'm just about forgotten it. It was fun. It was great. It was profitable, but it's just like one of those things that just 16 years came and went in a flash. It's pretty amazing how these things can pass by in our lives without even acknowledging it, that it's happening.
Well, here you've shared with myself and the audience and me plenty of times, but your experience, being a high achiever, and then that piece, the next piece of life, the later stage of life, which you've been doing for many, many years anyways, but you've been an achievement mentor, helping others, bringing that formula, that way of relaxing into the process with your guide. Who's like, if you're doubting yourself, well, this is science backed and experience backed. You provide this container to help folks get empowered in areas where they've, ignorance has been bliss. And it's now, the things are breaking down, things are not working, whether physically or mentally, emotionally, spiritually in their life. You're the person, been a go-to person for people to reach out, and you're the guy backstage. The guy backstage who's providing some sound interpretations of what you're getting a hit off of how they're expressing that needs attention in a non-judgmental, compassionate way. Maybe share just a little bit about how your journey has moved from outlaw, kid on a bicycle, foreshadowing, to you've gone through this evolutionary cycle. Like I said, you're like, I don't even know where those 16 years went, but you definitely know where you're being taken. And maybe share a little bit about the mission you've been on, and that you're still on, but it's evolving now. Maybe share a little bit about that piece. We'll talk for a few more minutes here, sure, because people have the attention spans of doorknobs these days, and we don't want to overwhelm everybody with things, but maybe share a little bit about that piece, bringing us up to current day.
Well, it is interesting because, my wife and I had very successful athletic clubs here in Denver, Colorado, as I did in New York. I sold those to move here in Colorado. When I met my wife, I was here doing the TV show. We were covering the Colorado State Bodybuilding Championship. And so I was, with my crew for Fox Sports Net, and we were staying in Boulder, Colorado, and my wife was just enrolled in CU, Colorado at the time. And we met at the competition. And it was one of those moments. It was, eyes met across the room, and it was really instant love and a connection. And we've been together for 30 years now. And so she's been a big part of my journey. And she's a brilliant epigenetic coach and does so much great things for great people in terms of the areas of nutrition, and well beyond that, in terms of the whole epigenetic cycle, which is just anything outside the cell that influences our DNA and how the cell expresses itself. And so she's been a big part of that and has really influenced my life in moving forward and following that journey process, you might say. And you know, the reason I bring that up is because we had to make a decision at one point. You know, do we continue to move forward with the athletic clubs, or which was, you know, like any business, it's a bricks and mortar. There's all the challenges with that, managing people and all the difficulties, but all the rewards as well. And so we
think
decided,
when I first met you, you had Riverfront.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. In fact, you and I met, we had just launched something called Experience the Leap coaching process. And Experience the Leap is a 4-step process. And so we sort of like, and I want to say we didn't create the Experience the Leap process. We witnessed it and then created a formula around it, because what we witnessed along the way, after years of going to different breakthrough events like Tony Robbins, Brendon Burchard, so many different events, T. Harv Eker's Millionaire Mind, and ultimately being hired by
walking with Tony Robbins too. I remember being at your event and having an arrow in my throat and stepping in and snapping that arrow.
Do you remember that? First we went out, we did the archery, and then we're like, now guess what? We're going to take those arrows, I'm going to break them with that. That was the breakthrough stuff. So we did a lot of that stuff. And as a result of witnessing this and experiencing it, we said, well, what? We literally sat down with another partner of ours who's now, we're in another process with him now, Aaron Huey, brilliant guy. And we were both working for Harv Eker, Secrets of the Millionaire Mind at that time, touring all over the world, speaking. I was recruited to do this. And so we decided to sit down and say, let's create something together. And we started looking at what is we talk about transformation. The word transformation has been thrown around a lot, but truly to go from where you were, Glenn, just a couple of years ago to where you are today has been a transformation. For me to go from outlaw biker, 1% kid in the special ed class, to becoming Mr. America, 16-year host of a Fox Sports Net TV show, #1 best-selling author, successful entrepreneur. It's a transformation, right? So we can agree on that. So it's not cliche. So we said, what is the process? Can we simplify this process? Have we witnessed the process? And what we witnessed along the way was that first there's a physical component. We call it body rapport. So there's 4 steps in this process. The body rapport component is number 1, because it's truly, I mean, when we talk about the ability to be able to step up to an edge and ultimately look over that edge at the abyss, whether we know what's on the other side or not, it's a leap to get there. We're leaving something behind. It's painful. It's frustrating. It's less than what we deserve in our lives. We've got to make that leap to the other side. It takes tremendous physical capability to be able to do that. But more so, we have to keep in mind, as Candace Pert wrote, that our body is our unconscious mind, that if we're not congruent with our body, the cells of our body, if we haven't been able to release the negative energy and find a more empowering physical, emotional DNA state, stepping off that edge will be impossible. We have to be connected and we have to be physically capable. We have to trust our body. So body rapport is about knowing, liking, and trusting our body to move us forward in whatever the process is, wherever we want to go in our lives next. That's the first step of the process. So we identify.
I always relate to that kind of like an acorn. I tell people, I said, right here, you're like an acorn, and here's what's being expressed. All the ancestors, all the history is stored in here, and all the future. So all the future oak tree, everything that's going to happen, it's all here. So that's what I found, with climbing, my evolution of my climbing ability from not being a climber to doing these crazy things. All of a sudden I realized, the more I try to methodically do all these things versus just see where my body wants to take me and lead me. And that, that's like with anything, when you start developing a level of mastery skill set, you get this place where, it's just like when you're learning, tennis and you're hitting balls in the machine and working on your technique, but then when you're in a match and you're playing, you're not doing those things. You're just trusting that you're where you need to be to get that ball, and that's one of the extraordinary things is that body rapport, where I'm connected, and what are the questions I'm asking from my body, and all the
Mhm.
cells all lining up and going, we're all moving this way now.
Yes, yes, yeah. And your body, and again, it goes back to those questions. The questions, your body will answer those questions, and we know how it answers them, right? You might hear this particular voice, but your body already answered the question. Your body's cells already create a state of retreat or fear or anxiety, and it's in the gut. It runs straight up the vagus nerve into the brain and releases chemicals into the body that reinforce that emotion and keep you trapped in whatever the next move might be. And if it's empowering, if the emotions are, I can do this, I am capable, I will manifest my magnificence, you can step and leap off that edge. By the way, you don't necessarily, I mean, if something happens, you can't, no one can, even a good coach can't and shouldn't push you off that edge. You have to step off the edge on your own in order to manifest that change, that transformation. And even if you fall, even if you don't make it to the other side, that's okay. Because guess what? You're going to wind up climbing to a higher level as a result of taking that leap, one way or the other, whether we make it to the next summit or we just fall. You're always going to be more empowered as a result of that. But your body will dictate that in many respects. So body rapport is key
Yeah, that
in that
anxiety
process.
percolating up to the surface is like the unconscious. The subconscious is trying to bring that wisdom up to help you. You know, it's like there's some other calculations here than you're able to do here.
That's right. That's right. And the body does it very quickly, very quickly. And the next step in the process we call brutal honesty. Because brutal honesty, it's interesting because it's like being brutally honest with yourself about who you are and what you're capable of. And the interesting thing about this is a sort of like the first reaction I get from most people in this process is the default. I'm not capable of that. I couldn't do that. That's not who I am. And you know, on a more positive note, it's just like, I'm the kind of person who does this, who does that. As soon as we identify ourselves as the kind of person or not the kind of person, we're not necessarily being brutally honest with ourselves. The brutal honesty comes from what we like to call the core and the crusty truth. The crusty truth is all the mud. And I use the example of the golden Buddha. I won't go into the full story of the golden Buddha, but understand that the golden Buddha was buried for over 500 years under clay. And the golden Buddha that still exists in where is it now? The country I flaked for a moment, but has been revealed. So the crusty truth is all this stuff we put on ourselves to hide, to protect ourselves. You know what I put on to protect myself? Savage skulls, the other biker colors, the biker gear, the knives, the gun, all the stuff. That was all crusty truth to keep the magnificent me from truly being shown. Because there's a chance when you show your truth to yourself, when you're truly brutally honest with yourself, it might mean rejection. It might mean not succeeding. It could mean incredible things for your lives, but it's a risk. It's always a risk. So we have to be brutally honest. So once you have the body rapport, the next step is to be brutally honest with yourself about what you're truly capable of. And the truth is, we know on an unconscious level, all of us know deep down inside, we're capable of more. We can do more. We have magnificence in us that all we have to do is start peeling away that crusty truth, because it is the truth. It's what we've learned to believe based on our ego. Once we begin to peel that away, and it's a process to peel that away, by the way, it's not necessarily something you can just suddenly do. There's a process of eliminating that. And so getting to the core truth of who you really are, that's the brutal honesty component of it. And that is a process in itself. The next step is what we like to call temptation. And this is where, and by the way, this is everything that I'm sharing with you is I've experienced it. This is part of the transformation process for me, for Glenn, for you in this process as well. The next is the temptation, because once you understand your body, you have rapport with it, you've come to terms with who you really are and what you're capable of, and then you're not living up to that, and then you have more magnificence in you, and you've gone through the process of eliminating and scraping away that crusty truth, you might say. Then comes the temptation, and you're standing on that precipice, you might say, and you're ready to take that leap. The temptation is to stay with the familiar. The temptation is to listen to that inner voice that we talked about earlier. And that's the dragon. So the dragon is the temptation. The dragon will always want you to stay right where you are. We're comfortable right here. Hey, you took second in the national championship. That's good enough. Remember who you really are. You're not really a champion. You're that dumbass kid that dropped out of high school, rode his motorcycle. You're not a champion. Why go back and try for a third time? You don't need to. What do you prove? You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to get back on that rock and prove anything to anybody. You tried. It's good enough. That's not who you are. You're not as successful. You're not even a rock climber, for crying out loud. That's the temptation. And the temptation is to stay right where we are in the comfort zone of the life that we built and the ego that has identified itself as that and nothing more. So we have to be able to overcome that temptation, understand how it, remember when we did the arrow break was all about identifying your personal dragon.
Yeah,
and how it shows up.
That once you had that success with that first one, you had to step through 2 more times to just anchor that certainty and that commitment.
That's right. That's right.
It's in the face of that.
Part of that process. And the fourth step in that process, and certainly for me, and again, keep in mind, this is the process that was revealed to us, and it resonates because it's completely part of my process. The third step we call the AMPLIFY, the action based in faith. So no matter what, even if you've got the body rapport and you've worked on it, and you've got the brutal honesty and you've worked on it, you've gone through the process, and you understand your dragon, you understand your temptation, you understand all the fears, doubts, and uncertainties that come with that, and how it communicates, and how it will try and stop you, and how it's tried to stop you in the past. You've got all that. We've spent the last 3-6 months working on all that. We're ready to go. That may not be enough to get you to take that leap of faith, to create the transformation you want in your life. I'm a big believer that we have to have faith in something, whether it's God, whether it's the process, whether it's faith in ourselves, faith in our family, faith in our community, faith in our friends, something that we know no matter what happens, it's going to be all right. We're going to make it. Whether it's in the form we want to move towards or some other form completely, it's going to be all right. And we have to have that faith, because that's what will really move you. And the action based in faith, and we call it the AMPLIFY, right? Remember the movie Back to the Future?
Mm-hmm.
Who doesn't remember Back to the Future, for crying out loud? And the villain was—
How many gigawatts was it?
What was it?
How many gigawatts?
I can't remember the amount of gigawatts, but we went to a car show yesterday. We saw a McLaurin. I literally was saying, "Where's the flux capacitor?" Yeah, I thought they all actually came with flux capacitors, right? It didn't have one. I was disappointed. But anyway, Biff was the villain. Right. And if you remember that powerful scene, because this sums it all up, brings it all together, which is that scene where McFly has to rescue the girl. He opens the door to the car.
It's going.
And she's in the car, and Biff is sexually assaulting her. Yep. Right? I mean, he has every plan. We know, we can look ahead. He has every plan of raping her in that car. And he opens the door, and Biff said, "Walk away, McFly. Just walk away." And you could see he's wrestling with this. He's wrestling with what? The temptation, the dragon. He's scared to death of Biff. Instead, he makes an empowering decision, winds his fist up, and knocks Biff out. That moment, he was connected to his body. He took that empowering deep breath. He knew he had more. And he knew he had to come to the rescue of someone. So he had faith that, you know what, no matter what, I've got to act here. I've got to make this happen. I've got to save this woman. And they wound up being in love and living together happily ever after. So body rapport, the brutal honesty, the temptation, and the action based in faith is the process that I use to help other people experience the transformation in their life. And it's a process. It is a process. We went through a lot of it. We trained together for the first several months, getting you back into physical shape, reconnecting with your body, doing some boxing, getting on those rocks, reconnecting with the body until ultimately we're ready to understand it. I have got more in me. I can be more. You wanted to believe that. You had some idea that you wanted to be more, you could be more, but you needed to start to manifest that and do things that were challenging again. And ultimately you began to peel away that crusty truth and reveal who you really are, the power, the magnificence. And then the temptation, of course, always shows up. It's the little inner voice. And then you took that action based in faith, and you've done it several times. You know, I'm praising you because it's just like I said, that Devil's Tower experience was a very profound one for me in recognizing what you've been able to do, and that all of us can do it if we make up our minds, if we decide to do this.
And all of us need to do it.
We do.
Not necessarily Devil's Tower,
And-
but whatever your Devil's Tower is, all of us need to constantly be, you know, I tell people, you know, the top of one mountain's the bottom of many. So
That's right. That's absolutely right. In fact, we call it the leap continuum. It's once you leap from one, all it does is give you an opportunity to experience the next, and then have a viewpoint that there is something more, even more, and even more than that.
yeah, I mean, I often tell people, you know, my experience when I got to the top of Devil's Tower, you know, I was there for a few moments, you know, to sip some water, eat the rest of my snacks, take some photos, sign the, you know, the people would climb list, you know, in the can and shove it back in the metal canister, and look around at a view that I'd seen, you know, it was beautiful, but I've been on top of other mountains, you know, I've climbed other mountains and done things, not like this technical skill and tenacity that was needed.
Sure. We've got 14 here in Colorado. You've done several of those, so have I. Different
but the
climate.
experience for me, and you probably experienced when you completed you know, a competition and got to this high level and won in your eyes. It's like you get a moment at the big boy table, you know, I'd say, or the big girl table, whatever it is, you gotta go, pour me a glass, you know, and then you gotta go down, you know, and then you gotta go back into the world and you gotta get another.
That's right.
And you know, it was like, all right, got to the top. Well, now I got to get out of these painful shoes. And I mean, I had to remind myself to go woo at, you know, I almost left the top. And so did the arms up and, you know, and then climbed down, and I was like, all right, I'm going to get a cheeseburger, and I'm going to get a one of those Snickers ice cream bars. I'm going to celebrate. But I'm not going to eat cheeseburgers every day after that. And
No.
bars. It's time to begin the training again.
Right. Get back into the training. Exactly.
Again. So
that's the life journey is always training. It's always learning. It's always growing. If we're not growing, we're dying. Everything in the universe is either growing or dying. And as we mature, as we get older, and I know you're in your 50s now, aren't you, Glenn?
I'm touching on that now. I'm at 49.
49, you're close. Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
You, my wife and I, you are just about the same age. She'll be 50 in January. And wow. Oh, I'm in trouble for even saying that.
And before me. Okay.
But as we get older, you know what I mean? We've got to stay that journey. It's tempting to stop growing. We feel like we've done it already. We have grandchildren now, and you know, we've gone through school, we've finished our business, or we're retired, whatever it might be. It's like the temptation to stop growing. We should never stop growing. We continue to grow. Sometimes it's more of an effort as we age, but we have to continue to do so. And you, with a coach, there's no reason why you can't continue to challenge yourself, small or large, man. It doesn't have to be Devil's Tower. By the way, you know, we know this, right? I mean, and this is something I experienced in my own life, and I'll just share this very quickly because I know we're running out of time. One of the things that, and it's certainly not a regret, but it's also one of those things that was an eye opener for me. My goal from the beginning was to win the Mr. America competition. It was never to win the Mr. Olympia. The Mr. Olympia is the pinnacle. It is the Mount Everest. It is the Super Bowl of bodybuilding. That was never my intended goal. Did I try for it? Did I compete in it? Yes. To qualify for the Olympia is a tremendous undertaking as well, because now you move from the amateur level to the pro level, and the guys are all from all over the world, and they're the best. The guys I've been seeing in the magazines for years, right? I'm competing against these guys now. And so to qualify for the Olympia is an undertaking in itself. And I did twice, but never won it. And I believe one of the reasons why I didn't do better or win the Olympia ultimately was because it was just like, there was a limiting belief around that. Someone would look at you and say, Devil's Tower, that's it? When are you going to conquer Everest? When are you going to conquer the next big mountain? Someone who just, one of my clients, just broke $1 million this year in their new business, right? And I said, how come just $1 million? He was like, what are you talking about? $1 million? I said, not if you're Bill Gates, it's not. I said, Why isn't it 2 million? When will it be 2 million? When's it going to be 10 million? What about 20 million? And it's just like, there's always another level. And that's that leap continuum. It's just like, there's always another. Doesn't necessarily mean we have to pursue it. Doesn't mean we have to, our entire lives have to be consumed with trying to accomplish something to continue to validate ourselves. No, but we should always be looking at those opportunities to grow. Because
And
if
if
we
it's
grow
not
here, we're
growing,
growing
then
everywhere.
it's not maintained. There's no such thing as maintenance. You're either growing it and improving at it, or it's going to hell in a handbasket. And what
Absolutely.
you not given attention and intention to, it's going to go somewhere else.
I know. I mean, I experience it now. I mean, I used to blog all the time and wrote 2 best-selling books, and it's just like, I haven't written. And when you asked me to do the forward for your book, I literally felt like, what? I started writing. I'm like, it was alien. It felt weird. It was just like, it was like, you don't stay at the same level, you drop. I had to reignite those neural pathways again, right? So
Yeah.
it's the same thing for anything and everything. And listen, maybe you're a golfer and you haven't golfed in years, but you're doing something else. That's okay. Let the golfing go, continue to pursue something else. And that's what happens along the way. I think you're dancing now. Aren't you training to be a dance instructor?
Yeah.
I mean, talk about a totally different position,
Yeah.
you know, but again, you don't need to
And
be.
like anything, yeah, like even climbing, I climbed today. I hadn't climbed in a couple of weeks because I've been busy with other activities. And climbing is one of those activities that it drops much further than even like the weight room stuff and other types of training.
Quickly, right?
Quickly, like you get on and you're like, oh, this is hard. Like, how did I lost so much. I gotta,
yeah.
you feel, just like someone going to the gym the first time when they're like, ow, this hurts, that's enough, and you haven't fallen in love yet with the pain of pushing through.
You do.
So that part, when we first started kind of working out, like, I can't just jump back into all the hardcore training I had been accustomed to for many years. It's like I had to build back up. I remember
That's right.
doing 100 rep
Recondition.
workouts, I was like, oh, these are miserable,
Yeah.
Then I was like, oh, I love these things. And now I'm going to have other people get tortured with these.
I'm with you, man.
Well,
You're right.
as we wrap up today, how might folks get a hold of you and peer in on what you're up to these days? I know you haven't been writing any blogs lately, and they'll get an opportunity to see you featured in my new book. But where are you and what you're up to? Like, what are some good spots to locate you?
Well, we are really kind of moving more towards working with people that are sort of like, let's just say, maturing in their lives and are struggling with some of that. It may be physically, it may be emotionally, it may be that, hey, they feel like they've done it all and want to find another way to keep themselves inspired. So we're working in that area right now. We have something that's really cool. It's called the Vitality Score. And that just sort of like helps most people in that area. If you're over 40, it'll help you identify where you are in terms of your energy levels and provide some tools that can help boost you those mentally, physically, emotionally, even spiritually along the way. So you can find that at vitalityscore.com. Or if you want to read some of the stuff that we've done, grab a hold of a copy of the book, 7 Rules of Achievement, go to maxmindset.com. maxmindset.com. And I've loved Facebook. Love for you guys to connect with me on Facebook or Instagram at Tom Terwilliger. It's simple as that. And I'd love to hear from you and connect and friend you up there. And any friend of Glenn's is a friend of mine. I can tell you that right now.
True.
Sure.
Well, thank you, Tom, for being a wonderful guest on my podcast here and our podcast today. And I hope everybody enjoyed it. And we'll see you on the next episode. So take care, everybody. And thank you,
everybody.
See you, folks.